Remember in 2015 when Valve changed the default class icons that appear on the scoreboard? Well, I wish I didn't. In an attempt to modernize the late 2000s look of some of TF2's assets, Valve decided that the class icon should be updated. While these don't look bad, they definitely show their age through the use of thick lines and elusive depth. But the updated versions they came up with, well...
No.
I refuse to believe that a professional graphic designer got paid to make these. Now, I still see a few of you sitting there saying, what's wrong with them? They look perfectly fine. This is a terribly designed set of icons from both an aesthetic and functionality standpoint, and I'm about to give you the rundown as to exactly why. First of all, let's start with aesthetics, or simply how the icons themselves look. The things that stand out immediately are the bright yellow backgrounds, which sometimes look okay enough, but other times are absolutely hideous. The objects within the icons look almost hand-drawn, which can be nice in a vacuum, but the level of detail they were given makes them look closer to an app you'd find on your iPod in 2011 than an asset for a modern game. But the biggest crime this set commits is a blatant disregard for any kind of visual consistency. Having a group of icons look like they're supposed to be a set is one of the most important things to remember with icon design, and the icons here, have some glaring issues to say the least. Why is the sniper icon the only one to not have shading? Why is the scout icon the only one to go outside of the circle? Why is the pyro icon the only one to use a gradient in the background? Why are the fire particles on the demo man icon flat, but the particles on the soldier icon a weird gradient? Why does the scout icon use negative space to separate the wing from the shoe when nothing else does that? Why does the wrench icon use a different shading than everything else? What is even going on here? And most importantly, where are any of these icons used in the actual game itself? Small tangent, but the more I look at either set of icons, the more I realize that these don't really make a lot of sense. If you compare the scoreboard icons to the icons in the mercenaries' clothing, most if not all of them are weirdly different. Some are only minor changes, like the snipers having more detail and the engineers being half a wrench instead of the entire wrench, but others like the demo man and heavy are completely different altogether. But I don't think that these are too far removed from the classes to just not make any sense. They're at least semi-representational if nothing else. It's just odd that something so seemingly basic would have such a large discrepancy. Now, those unfamiliar with the field of graphic design may think that all of the complaints I just gave are nitpicks and don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Well, that's a fair assumption to make. These are all things that people will pick up on, even if it's not consciously. So compare all of that to the old set of icons. Even though they have very different colors and shapes, they have enough unifying features to make them look consistent. The thick black outlines, the mostly consistent level of detail and shading, and the similar chroma across colors makes all these icons look like they belong together. Or at least mostly. There are still a few issues, but they look much better than the newer set. So okay, we've established that these icons could be an eyesore, but at least they get the job done, right? Well, no, not really. Within the scope of TF2 itself, the place you're going to see these icons most often is on the scoreboard next to each person's name. Because the time spent looking at a scoreboard is time not spent looking at the actual game, you want these icons to be easily readable and recognizable so you can convey that information as quickly as possible. The old icons, as dated as they look, do this pretty well, with each icon's unique shape and color making it immediately identifiable. For instance, the medic icon is a bright red cross, the pyro icon's an orange flame, the soldier icon's a gray rocket with an orange highlight, and so on. All 9 of the icons have unique silhouettes, color patterns, and identifying features that make reading them at a glance super easy. But the newer icons throw all of that out the window by giving everything a bright yellow background that catches your eye more quickly than the object in the foreground. When everything looks like a yellow circle at first glance, the information is much less immediately clear. And while I admit that this could just be me not being used to them, I found myself having to actually decipher these to see what classes people were playing instead of just immediately hitting tab and knowing. These were not made for readability at all. So no matter how you slice the cake, these icons are inferior to their older counterparts in every meaningful way. So then that begs the question, if instead of asking their janitor to whip something up in Microsoft Paint, Valve had a professional graphic designer recreate the class icons, what might they look like? This was originally going to be the point in the video where I fired up Illustrator and started making my own icons, but then I realized the old set that we have actually works. I know I've mentioned the style looking dated, but in the scheme of TF2, it actually matches the rest of the game quite well. I really couldn't imagine flat-looking modern icons instead of the current set. Kinda like the minimalistic HUDs people tend to use, they would look so out of place when compared to the cartoony aesthetic and in-game art style. So really, I don't think Valve needed to touch these at all to make them functional. But that doesn't mean I can't think of any improvements to them. The first thing I would change are the actual symbols themselves, because as I mentioned, the current ones don't really match what exists in the game. So I would probably change the demo man symbol to a sticky bomb instead of a less than sticky bomb, and the spy symbol to a knife instead of his balaclava. Pyros and medics could also use a bit more detail to keep in line with everything else, and snipers, I'll be honest, I don't even know what this one. But aesthetics aside, one gameplay change I think might be super cool would be to add scoreboard indicators to indicate what weapons your teammates might be running. The best part about doing this is that thanks to MVM, we already have a lot of them. The icons for Demo Knight, Huntsman, every soldier banner, and a couple of metiguns are already drawn up and in the game, and knowing what banners your soldiers are running and what Uber your medic is running would be super useful for casual games where communication is less than existent. We wouldn't even have to do this for every weapon in the game, just the ones like banners which affect how you might play around your team. Oh, and having subclasses represented on the scoreboard would be incredibly helpful information as well, since the amount of times I've avoided choosing Demo Man because our team already has 3, only to find out that there's not a single explosive among them is way too high for me to count at this point. Ideally, this would of course be added alongside major improvements to the kill icons because those are equally as terrible, but that's a video for another day. You know, if I had a nickel for each set of terrible icons that was added during the Tough Break update, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't much, but it's weird that it happened twice. For some reason, the other thing that Valve deemed necessary during this update was simplifying the ping indicators. Numbers? What are you, some kind of nerd? Is this what you're doing in your free time? Clearly it would be easier if instead of knowing exactly what your ping is, you could just look at these colorful bars for all the answers. Okay, enough sarcasm, these bars suck. And this time around, I don't mean visually, they look fine enough. What I mean is that having 1 ping and having 99 ping appears exactly the same under this system, with both being in the green. It isn't until your ping hits the triple digits that it'll drop down into the yellow, and at that point I barely consider the game playable at a moderately high level. 150 ping is what's considered to go down to orange, and red doesn't happen unless your router has achieved combustion at a whopping 200 ping. That means that I could connect to a Korean server halfway across the world, my game completely unresponsive, but because I only have 148 ping, TF2 says, it's good enough, 2 out of 3 bars. Now, I get that the cutoff has to be somewhere, and I could cherry pick the lowest and the highest number for any given range at gasp at how they produce the same result. But like, that problem is negated entirely if you just use numbers. Why even bother trying to simplify in the first place? Worst case scenario, Timmy Gonzalez 2009 doesn't understand what the numbers mean, but that opens up a perfect opportunity for him to learn about a system that's widely used across online games. TF2 is a PC game, not a cell phone. We don't need complex numbers represented like this. The one thing about this change that I kinda do like is that the bots now have their own icon instead of just text saying bot for their pings. That's pretty cool, I guess. And frankly, I don't even mind there being different colors to represent connectivity levels. If you adjusted the ranges for each color to be more reasonable and colored the ping numbers themselves instead of replacing them with bars, this would actually make this change pretty neat. But that's not what we got, and what we did get is frankly awful. Okay, ran over. So anyway, those are some of my stronger opinions on super niche TF2 topics. I completely forgot they even made these changes until I saw a screenshot of a friend's game and got genuinely confused at the abundance of yellow. That being said, I do remember when both of these icon sets were added, and I strictly remember everyone hating them. So at the very least, public standards for good design are not quite dead. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like. If you hated this video, your complaints must be drawn as an icon to count, and most importantly, have a good one.